again to my YouTube channel. My name is Wumi Ajayi. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a channel where we believe that making a success of marriage is not about being man enough or being woman enough. It's about working at it, and it's about going back to the author's manual to find out how we can do marriage in such a way that we will enjoy the maximal benefits that God intends for us. Today I'll be starting a two-part series where I will be addressing the husbands and the wives. God has given specific instructions for each person. Today I'll be concentrating on the husbands. I know the wives will be more interested in this video than the husbands themselves. But don't worry, in my next part, I will be talking to the wives. And I would just like to apologize because I'm not a man, obviously. So if I sound like I'm talking to rather than talking with, please, I do apologize. It's not my intention. Right, why do I want to look into instructions for husband and wives? I realize that sometimes it's easy for us to be living in disobedience to our specific instructions for different reasons. Sometimes we then become monitors for our spouses to check whether they are actually obeying the instructions that have been given to them. And sometimes we justify our disobedience by our spouse's disobedience. You know, for example, a man can say, well, if you show me respect, then I will love you. But we need to remember that we cannot use our spouse's disobedience to justify our disobedience, because God's instructions to us as husbands and as wives, they are personal instructions. It's not dependent on our spouses obeying their instruction. If each party will do their own bit, then marriage will be sweet. We also need to live in the consciousness that we will give account of our stewardship in our marriages, how well we played our part, because marriage is our first ministry. So let's start with instructions to husbands. I want to start with the commonest one, and I will be dwelling on this today. When we look at Ephesians 5, from verse 25 to 29, which everyone knows, verse 25 says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Love is all about sacrifice. True love is actually about giving. It's not about receiving. As men, as imitators of Christ that you are, it's about finding practical ways in which you can actually give of yourself to your wife. Giving to your wife physically, spiritually, and emotionally. When God is saying love your wife, it's actually because God knows that your wife's basic need is love and affection. We know that it's easier to love your wife when she respects you, when she's playing her own part. We are not denying that. But the instruction to love your wife, there is no condition attached. God is not saying love your wife if she respects you. So let's look at practical ways. We know that working hard for the family, yes, a lot of men work hard for their family. You spend your life, you spend your time working hard for the family. I know a lot of men, including my husband, who work very hard to provide for their family. But sometimes society makes us believe that this is where it all ends, that this is all that is expected of men, that it doesn't need to go beyond that. But actually, providing for the family is a duty of love, not what love is all about. So because if providing for the family is what defines a man, then we're saying that a man who, maybe the wife earns more than him is not a true man. We need to look for other ways to show love to our wives, ways that you can make her life easier. You could be, doing house chores, looking after the children, physically, spiritually. Pray for her and pray with her, including praying about things, things that you see in her that you don't like, or things that feel that it doesn't glorify God. Instead of complaining, because that's what we find very easy to do, to complain about our spouses. Talk to her, emotional ways of showing, of giving of yourself to your wife. Talk to her. Be vulnerable with her in terms of your emotions, your feelings, and your fears. Most women actually appreciate vulnerability from their men. We don't see it as a sign of weakness when you're vulnerable. So you know your wife, and ways that you can actually give of yourself, like Christ gave himself to the church. How you can give of yourself to your wife in a way of loving her. Verse 26 says, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word. And then goes on in verse 27 to says, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. Loving your wife as Christ loved the church is making your wife your pride. It's not about her deserving it, because as humans, we want people to actually deserve things before we give it to them. But we are talking about being imitators of Christ. We are talking about being obedient to your specific instructions. See and treat your wife as your pride. Unfortunately, some men treat their cars better than they treat their wives. Cherish your wife. Treat her as a treasure of inestimable value. And unfortunately, again, some men value their phone more than their wives. They go everywhere with their phone. They go to the toilet. They spend so much time with their phone than they do with their wives. Part of cherishing your wife is spending time with her, is valuing her, telling her and letting her know that you value her. Gone are the days when women are classified as children. With children, you hear women and children, because we have oppressive cultures that treat women as less humans, just to feed men's ego. It's important that your wife know that you value her. Encourage her to maximize her potentials and to fulfill her purpose. There shouldn't be, I talked again, one of my videos about competition. There should not be any sense of competition or envy in our marriages. So as a man, you should be able to encourage your wife, push her on, to maximize her potentials and to fulfill her purpose. Support and encourage her growth in all areas and invest in her. So that as Christ loved the church in order to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle, holy and blameless. Your wife will be your pride. Your wife will be someone that you have so much pleasure in. Verse 28 says, in this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church. He who loves his wife loves himself. No one hates their own body. It's misnormal for someone to hate their own body. We listen to our body. When we're hungry, we feed our body. When we're thirsty, we drink. When there's pain and discomfort, we treat it. We go to the gym to build muscles. You go to the barbers to look good. We buy nice. We look after our own bodies. So the Bible is telling husbands here that you should look after in the same way. Love your wives as your own body. God wants men to look after their wives in the same way as Christ looks after the church. A man that does not see himself as one with his wife, who still sees himself as an independent of his wife, will struggle with this, because we're naturally selfish. But the Bible is saying here that husbands should love their wives as their own body. How do you love your own body? Some men pay so much attention to what they wear, how they look like and things, but they don't pay the same, well, not the same. They don't pay half of that attention to their wives. But the Bible is saying that if you want to love your wife as Christ loves the church, it involves actually seeing your wife as you, looking after your wife as you will look after your own body. The other part of loving your wife as Christ loves the church It's the First Corinthians 13, 4-8 kind of love. If you want to hear more about love, check my video from December 2022 out. It's titled Love is in the Air. It says love is patient. Men need to be patient with their wives. I mean, I'm a woman and I know that sometimes you just need to be patient with us. Love is kind. Kindness is a language that everybody understands. So as a man, if you show kindness to your wife, she will understand that language. It shows love because love has to be demonstrated. Love does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. I know that, there's some level of ego that helps a man to function. But when there's too much ego, sometimes it affects the way you relate with your wife. Love does not dishonor others. You should not dishonor your wife. There should be no room for, putting her down, being verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, physically abusive, or all these other forms of abuse in the way you treat your wife. It is not self-seeking. Love is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. So let it go. If your wife, she's done this, she's done that, she did this again, she's done it before, she's still doing it. We need grace. As a man, you need grace to be able to forgive so that we don't keep record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, rejoices with the truth. It protects, it trusts, it hopes, it perseveres. And verse 8 says, love never fails. Loving, you can never go wrong by loving your wife. You can never, ever go wrong. The kind of love that God wants you to have for your wife is a love that is unconditional. A love that does not give up on her. A love that is committed to her. Love is a choice. It's not a feeling, but we can feel loved. Like Christ demonstrated his love towards us. When you demonstrate love to your wife, she will feel loved. She will feel loved. It's about understanding what your wife's love language is her. We're all familiar with love languages. If it means getting her to take a quiz so that you will know how to demonstrate your love for her appropriately, then that's what you do. If it means speaking to her, just having a frank communication with her that I really, really want to love you. How do you want me to love you? What are the things that you think I can be doing that will demonstrate to you that I actually love you? And trust me, I'm sure your wife will have a list. She will be able to tell you. Now let's talk about affection. Love and affection go hand in hand. So if you show love, there's a chance that you will be showing affection to your wife. Affection is care. Affection is a feeling of liking. You care for someone. You have a tender attachment to them. You are fond of them. You are warm with them. You are tender. You are loving. And every man has to learn how to show affection to their wives. I know that, some cultures are better than the others when it comes to men showing affection. There are some cultures that, they're not very good at showing affection. But a woman that is shown affection will feel loved, definitely. There are different ways. A hug is an affectionate gesture, affectionate words, actions to show that you're fond of your wife, you love her, you like her, showing compassion, showing interest in her, showing interest in her well-being, showing if she's tired, just being there with, a cup of water or a drink, just give her a massage, tell her to, just sit down. Oh, you've been working so hard all day, you want to sit down. Gone are the days when women stay at home and they don't go to work. These days, in most families, the wife also go out to work. And so it's important that we don't stick to, the kitchen is the woman's thing, looking after the children is a woman's thing. Part of what the man can do to show that you love your wife is actually getting involved, getting your hands dirty when it comes to house chores, getting your hands dirty when it comes to looking after the children. Hold their hands. Holding hands is a way of showing affection. Touch. Again, I've done a video on the power of touch. If you want more on that, check my video out. Like I said earlier on, being affectionate doesn't come naturally to most men, but we can learn the same way that we learn in other areas of our lives. So I've talked about the importance of loving your wife as Christ loved the church. Christ loved the church and gave himself. You can give of yourself spiritually, physically, emotionally to your wife. You can love your wife as you love your own body. Make your wife your pride and practice the First Corinthians 13 4 to 8 kind of love with your wife. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to stop here because I don't want this video to be too long, but there is more to come. So be on the lookout for part 2 of this video. God bless you. Do remember, like I always say, marriage is to be enjoyed, not to be endured.